All right, jacked up December 3rd, 2024. Thanks for joining us across the WTOV 9 digital platforms. The news of the weekend, West Virginia University parting ways with its head football coach, Neal Brown, after 6 seasons, 2 games above 500, 3 games below 500 in the conference in the last 6 years. And we're going to talk about the decision to part ways with Neal and where the program can turn from here with Mike J. Asti of West Virginia Sports Now, covers the team, managing editor of West Virginia Sports Now. Mike, thanks so much for taking some time. I would have to imagine that the last 24 hours or so for you has been incredibly busy. But again, thanks for taking some time. We haven't had you on since the draft show, so thanks for hopping back on.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, it definitely been wild, but I was telling you off the air, I enjoyed that I was able to have a relaxing Thanksgiving holiday. So this at least waited until that was over. But yeah, it's been pretty wild, pretty hectic. Expected though, and I expected it to be this wild and to be this hectic. But no problem. Happy to catch my breath here and jump on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said it, expected. I think the writing was on the wall in 2024 especially. But I wanted to start with Saturday. Did the 52-15 loss play into effect of the decision coming when it did? Like if they would have kept the game competitive or maybe even won, does Neal save his job?
It's an interesting question, and it's a fair question now. So I'll answer it this way. The reports that came out a month and a half ago that he already was fired and decisions were made then, they weren't true. That was not accurate. I do think this was a possibility, maybe even a high probability to happen regardless, because as you know, the angst of the fan base, the billboards that were up around town, the fact that this is 6 years, not 1, 2, 3, or even 4 years in, even if you go 7-5, that's not exactly acceptable at a program like WVU. And there really wasn't excitement there. So this still could have easily happened. There were conversations, but nothing was decided a month and a half ago. But this easily could have still happened. Now, I never thought they were going to win that game in the first place, despite winning the UCF game, because that's a tough road trip. That's a horrible way to end the season. In all honesty, Jack, if this was a special year, that could have screamed disaster just in general. Texas Tech is always a competitive team, and in Lubbock, nobody likes going there. So to end the year when you're not really having a great year, that always was the game I thought they would lose. What I do think happened with that game, that there was a little bit of an impact in this regard. Number one, when you lose 52-15 and you already are on the hot seat in year 6 and the fan base already wants you gone, that was just full stop Wren Baker. You can't bring him back. I know for sure Wren Baker in the program liked him. They wanted to make this work. They were happy when they were able to keep him one more year a year ago. But when you lose that way, there was really no other decision. It was a point of no return. And they did the respectful thing of letting him talk to his players and all that. That's why this didn't happen Saturday night or Sunday morning like some were expecting. They let it linger. But at that point, it just had to eventually occur. And I also do think that so the end of the relationship with Dana Holgorsen, both sides wanted to end things, but they agreed to mutually part ways and Dana got another job. The program has not legitimately fired a coach, if you think back, for decades. I mean, Rich Rod left. Bill Stewart was, let's put it this way, he was ousted. Dana came. He then had the parting of ways where he took another job. So factually, he left. This is the first true firing for WVU football-wise in a long time. And I think if they would have won, if they would have kept it close, they may have let Neal coach the bowl game and then made the decision then. Or they may have said we're mutually parting ways and they allowed Neal to save face that way, kind of what the write-up was, but they might have announced it that way. But when you lose that way, I think if Wren Baker did anything other than a firing, he would have looked weak. And I don't think he's a weak person. I think he had to make it a firing when you lose that way. And I think it forced his hand to make it as quick as possible and to have it happen now and to be what it was. Because as Neal Brown, people always joke that he always did just enough to keep his job over these 6 years, even though it never really elevated him. I said in the show just last night, he did just enough to lose his job right then in that game. Like, that wasn't just a regular loss. They were never in that game at all. And it was just a forcing of the hand to happen and go down this way.
Yeah, and that was kind of my next question, or at least leading into it. I mean, summarizing his tenure,
Yeah.
If you could, like the way that I feel like I would do it is when you say just enough, just about average, but at a Power 5 program like West Virginia that's
Yeah.
been near the pinnacle of college football in the 21st century, that's
Yeah.
not good enough. And I mean, if you could just kind of summarize it, and above all, it seemed like he was a really good guy, very much well liked by the media and by his players too.
Sure. And my first reaction when this news went down and it became official, honestly, as someone who's covered him for years and kind of got to know him well, and it's well documented, I was in the midst of some dust ups and some viral moments this past year with him. I did feel bad for him in a way. I do think he's a really nice guy. I do think his family are good people. I know everybody there liked him as a person. There's a colleague of mine, WVSN, that was let go from another outlet a couple weeks ago, and Neal Brown reached out to him not only publicly but privately about and gave him a long write up on like what he thinks of him. Let's face it, whether you're a national championship coach or you're an unsuccessful coach, not a lot of coaches are doing that, and he didn't have to do it, and that's not a requirement. He's done things like that. He reached out when my grandfather died years ago, and that was when he was really just first getting to know me. So he is a really, really, really good guy, and I do believe, Jack, that while I totally get what you're saying, when you have a program like West Virginia that has won 15 conference titles, which is top 25 all time, is the 15th winningest program all time. These are some numbers that I think people are surprised to hear nationally when you look at the program. And I can go on, that Neal Brown's tenure of 2 games over 500, only 2 bowl wins. He's missed bowl games in multiple years. If they don't win a bowl game this year, this would be a losing season for West Virginia again.
Mhm.
He wouldn't get that loss, but it would still be presided over by him. It's just not nearly enough. It's not acceptable. And you look at Dana Holgorsen, people thought it was a polarizing tenure, only, the 4-win year. He only had 1 year where he missed a bowl game in 8 years. He won the Orange Bowl. He won a conference title. He had 2 10-win seasons, not just one. Rich Rod had him on the pinnacle, as you mentioned, but did win major bowl games. Bill Stewart won 9 games several years in a row, 3 years in a row before he was ousted. And Don Nehlen's in the literal College Football Hall of Fame, and 200 wins, all the major events, all the major bowl games, etc. And if you can go back to Spears 100 years ago, the year that people think they should claim a national title. There's been successful coaches, there's been successful tenures. And then Neal Brown, if you do the math, wins and loss wise, win percentage wise, I actually believe it's the second worst in 100 plus years. Like that is how mediocre it was, and there have been bad years. So it's a mediocre tenure, but he's a really good guy. I do feel bad for him, but I think that hopefully this can be a healing for the fan base too, because they wanted this for a while. But I do think Neal Brown, despite not good enough tenure, not enough quality wins, not enough rank wins, not enough success in big games, and not near the standard of the program, I do think him and his family, I'll say, I do think they were also treated a little bit unfairly at times. Like, there are other coaches that have had worse runs these past 6 years, and let's say national networks didn't discuss them. He was getting made fun of on national networks. There were billboards up. His family couldn't go to the movies without things getting thrown at them. Like that stuff shouldn't be going on. And I hope that doesn't go on with the next coach. But simply put, the Neal Brown tenure was not good enough for a program of the caliber of West Virginia in a Power 4 conference. And now in a conference that with Texas and Oklahoma not there, I think that makes it even a better job. It is a wide
I think this
open
year
field.
proved more than any year, and it's the first year of it, that it's incredibly winnable for a team like West Virginia.
Yeah, it's a wide open conference. And if you do win it, I think people think that if you get disrespected nationally, maybe you could argue that, but I think they would get respected because you have tons to bring in terms of a fan base, in terms of attention, in terms of McAfee talking about the program every day. If they win in the Big 12, I think the networks would love having them in there and McAfee going to everything. Like they would get bumps, and it is a winnable situation. WVU, for anyone who doesn't know, this also may sound wild. The current Big 12, WVU is the winningest program all time in the conference right now, with Oklahoma and Texas gone. So the door is right there. And I even think the Country Road Trust Collective is one of the better collectives in the country. If you ever go down to the Goat in Morgantown, they have a restaurant where they get proceeds. That's pretty revolutionary. So there are issues, obviously. There are issues with the program. But I do think it's a good job, and it wasn't good enough for him, especially this year, to take a step back this year after last year. you had the 9 wins, and it's a more wide open field this year, and you're not a part of that with all these. Like, if Iowa State can contend in the Big 12, so can West Virginia. Iowa State has not won a conference title since 1912. I
Yeah.
mean, and like that's all, and West Virginia is not able to contend. That's just hard to imagine. So there might have been a ceiling with Brown, but I do feel bad in a way too, and hopefully maybe he's at peace, because I think he kind of was sick of the situation as well. Like, I think he saw the writing on the wall as well.
Yeah. And you brought up the collective. How would you assess his recruiting classes? I mean, if you go back to, I mean, his first real one in 2020, it was 4th in the conference, 37th nationally. To in 2024, it was 13th in the Big 12 and 61st nationally. 2025, and this is all according to 247 Sports. 2025, kind of a bounce back, 46 nationally currently, 7th overall in the conference, but that's all based off of the high school aspect of it. How would you assess, him recruiting high school kids, and then once the portal became more relevant, how he kind of adapted to life with NIL and the transfer portal and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a Neal Brown story. I don't want to make this like on his tombstone one day, but it's average. That again is the case. I do think there are some people that slander it because they forget that he did have a top 40 class. They forget that it was top 50 and really almost really top 40 a year ago. They forget some of the home runs in the transfer portal that did exist, certainly the last couple years. This man just talked to Beanie Bishop. This man saved Beanie Bishop. Beanie Bishop was in the Big Ten. Minnesota didn't know how to use him. Nobody wanted him before that. He was not highly recruited out of high school. Beanie Bishop has said as recent as a month ago that Neal Brown saved his career in life, and he could be Defensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL this year. So they have been able to hit home runs in the transfer portal, in recruiting. There have been some of those moments. Rodney Gallagher is a 4-star that I know Pitt and Penn State wanted. They wanted him. They would have taken him if he was available. He talked to all of those. He talked to Narduzzi and Franklin 5 or 6 times, and he picked West Virginia early on and stayed all the way with them because of Neal Brown. And he even told me at that time, and he put it out there publicly now, that if Neal Brown was fired then 2 years ago, he would have decommitted. He would be at Penn State. Now, everything you're saying is also up in the air. Like, who knows what Gallagher would do now that Brown is gone? Who knows? There's a lot of players already decommitting from 2025. Who knows where that'll go? This might depend on how quickly they hire another coach and where that goes. But I do think it was a roller coaster ride for Brown recruiting as well. I do think it was average overall. And to be fair to Brown, I do think the first couple years that you're mentioning there were prior to the current format of college football. So prior to this crazy transfer portal rules. He has said this even to me directly. He said this on my show, that in 2019, if he had the current transfer portal rules, even if they didn't win, he would have got rid of almost the whole roster, because at that point they were malcontents and they were mad because of the Holgerson situation, and they would have had to sit out, and they didn't have the current rules, and they were canceled in the locker room. That's been talked about publicly as well. He had to deal with them, some of them for multiple years. That's not easy to deal with. That definitely could hurt recruiting. Once he kind of got in there and got his crew in 2021 and onward, and that included a bad 2022, I think his recruiting was average. But to be fair to him too, even when Rich Rod was having great success, or even when Dana was having great success, just in recent memory, it's not like they were doing it with top 10 recruiting classes. So they were doing it with top 30, top 40, even in their best years as well, and they had better success. So it's around on par with what's happened in recent memory, and there was a lot of hiccups and issues that happened during his ride that could hurt things, but he did hit some home runs. This past year, though, in the portal was the major problem. I mean, you hit on Beanie Bishop a year earlier, and then you vocally said Garnet Hollis is going to be the next Beanie Bishop, and so Garnet Hollis sits there in the before the season and says, "I'm going to do what Beanie Bishop did. He's motivating me." Jack, he did not. He was not nearly as good. And when you say this guy's a replacement for that man who's a contender All-American, and I can give you maybe 2 highlights the whole year, and it was really bad play, and he was worse than he was at Northwestern. It's just not enough. Cole Taylor, I think he's a really good player, but he had, arguably a worse year than a year earlier. So Jaheim White was a recruit of Brown. Like, nobody else wanted him. He hit on him. There are players like that I can mention, but I think also maybe Brown, for West Virginia fans, they probably like this. I think he did better in the state. I'll say that. He got a lot more talent in the state. Dana Holgerson, everyone knows, he basically said, I don't care about recruiting West Virginia in-state talent. There's not enough of them, and it is issues there. I mean, you have to go beyond. But he did a lot more in the state to lock in those great players like a Zach Frazier, like a Doug Nestor, who may have went elsewhere if Dana Holgerson was still the coach. So that's kind of a feather in the cap for Brown as well. But yeah, I mean, it's overall average. It overall wasn't enough. The swings and misses didn't work enough to the hits. But recruiting is also hard to evaluate because like the ranking of last year, it included players that were ranked 4 stars, and then after signing day, they got bumped down to 3-star. So like he thought they were a 4-star player and they get bumped down. So it's hard to go off of just the rankings because that's then where they stand. Like Obina Onwuka is 1. He was a 4-star and literally 24 hours after signing, he became a 3-star. Like what changed? I mean, what changed in 24 hours? The man hasn't taken the field to put a jersey on yet. Like, what are you doing? So, but overall it was average.
Before we get into some candidate talk, the buyout for Neal was just shy of 10 million, reported at 9.775. And there'd been a lot of talk out there that the Diamondbacks owner Ken Kendrick was vocal about being involved potentially in a Neal Brown buyout. Have you heard anything? Where's that 10 million bucks coming from? Is it from the university right now, or is a guy like Ken Kendrick maybe involved in a check or two?
Yeah, so I don't know factually exactly right now where it's coming from. Factually, it would be on the hook from the university. I mean, they worked something out. That's definitely been said to a lot of his media that there was something that was worked out that does give you tea leaves that maybe Brown would take a little bit less. The thought that he would, give it up all or resign or they would just not pay it, it was never going to actually happen. Ken Kendrick is definitely involved, though. So Ken Kendrick is very involved, whether it be to the Mountaineer Athletic Club or to Country Road Trust and donating right there. He was very involved in the Huggins situation. He was flooding money there to help save that roster, which obviously didn't lead to anything, but he definitely was involved financially there. There are a lot of other donors. You want to look this up. A lot of them are called the Wolf Pack. They're very heavily involved in donations to W Athletics. So we'll see what they can do. From what I've heard, Ken Kendrick is going to be part of this, is going to offer some money financially to help pay this. Brown is going to get a lot of this. He is not willing to not get it, which I don't blame him. I don't blame him. And it's going to come the rest from the program, which will hurt, but I will also I do know that part of how Wren was able to do this and part of how this was in the works, certainly after the Texas Tech game, that there was donation, some of it public off of websites, some of it even private, some from Ken Kendrick. McAfee is heavily involved in this. He's already, put that out there publicly, but that he's put money in privately as well. He's been involved. He's been helping. There are others as well that have helped soften the hit of the buyout even before this news came. They kind of made it clear to Wren, like, the money is now there. The money no longer is you're going to be your problem. Doesn't mean that money is still great, because they obviously do have to now use money to hire a new coach and fund a new roster and try to retain whoever they want to retain. But they're going to get some from Ken Kendrick and others, but the school will have to pay the rest. And, it's kind of confusing with W's financial situation for anybody. Everyone knows about what's going on at the school financially. That is separate than the athletic department. That is separate than Country Road Trust. It's all separate. So it's not like they just can't do it and all of a sudden they're going to go in bankruptcy. It's going to happen and he's going to get it. And it also, I have heard, it could be spread out over 2 years. So it's not like he's going to get it directly, and he's apparently fine with that as well, from what I've heard. So more of Neal Brown being a good guy. I mean, he is a really, really good guy, but I don't think anyone as good of a guy as anybody ever could be is going to say, you just keep the change. I'm going to take $0. Like,
exactly. No. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know what's going to go on with that guy's coaching future. He doesn't know. Right. You want some obviously financial security in that regard if you can get it. What qualities, what philosophies do you think that Wren Baker, do you think that this university is going to be targeting in a next head coach?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. And we're going to kind of find that out. I tell you what I know from Wren Baker and his previous coaching searches. Number one, he does prefer experience over not. He prefers head coaching experience, even if it means at a lower level. So he does prefer group of 5 head coaching experience or mid-major in basketball, which was evident with Darren DeVries being hired, over the hot assistant. Now, that anyone who's been following my coverage and listened to this, that does create some hypocrisy to my report the night of the news, because I can tell you that Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator at Penn State, is a candidate 100% and is going to interview for the job, and he expects to interview for the job. He would then not be somebody with head coaching experience. He would be somebody who would be the hot coordinator. He'd be similar to a Dana Holgorsen hire from a decade plus ago for longtime Mountaineer fans. He is somebody, though, that would have familiarity with the Big 12. He did provide the greatest success for Jalen Daniels, who I think, just screams he's a prototypical West Virginia quarterback. He did not have success without Andy Kotelnicki this past year, interceptions all over the place.
Yep.
He elevated Drew Aller. A lot of Penn State fans are out on Aller 2 years ago, a year ago, and before this season, and he elevated him and made him even better. A lot of Penn State fans, despite winning a year earlier, the offense was kind of boring, and now it's very exciting. And a lot of that is credit to him. He's in his early 40s. He is the hot coordinator name that someone's going to hire, if not West Virginia. And I know North Carolina is interested in him too. So he's a name out there. But Wren Baker's not somebody that gets married to West Virginia ties, WVU connections. Look at the hires. Look at what he said. Even before Mark Kellogg with the women's team, I asked him directly about Kim Stevens at the time and Kim Caldwell, and he dismissed it and said, I don't think she's ready yet. I get that she's having success in West Virginia, but we're not elevating, that level to WVU. This is a big time job, as you even were saying in the open. Like, this is a job that you can't mess around with. This is a very important hire for Wren Baker. So I do also think he's going to likely lean offensive minded. The program has not hired a defensive minded coach in decades either. I mean, Britchrod, Dana, now even Don Nalen, those are offensive-minded coaches. Neal Brown was an offensive-minded guy. I would lean towards offensive guy with some experience. If you're giving me a hot coordinator, it probably is Andy Kotelnicki or nobody else. Yeah, I would bet. I'm sure Jimbo, Richrod, those guys will get phone calls, at least be consulted if they're not going to be the guy. Nick Saban too. I don't see those guys actually being hired. I don't think, Nick Saban's a full stop. He basically has said it's not happening, and so is McAfee. Jimbo maybe could be that sexy influx of, pizzazz for the program that would get you a national exposure. And I would lean that Richrod's not happening either. I always heard that he didn't want to mess with the stress of this again, even though some now are hearing that he does now want the job. But if you look at his track record after WVU, it's not been nearly what it was at WVU. He had that one big year at Arizona, and then it's kind of been now this group of 5 success and failing in Michigan. So we'll see. I would lean offense. I would lean experience. Maybe it could be Kotelnicki off of being the hot name. But I also will tell you, Wren Baker is going to take his time. I do not expect this in 24 hours, 48 hours. I do not. I think he's going to take his time. He's not going to go too long, but he's going to take his time. He's been looking. He has a list. He's been checking it twice, but he's not going to rush this either. And I would expect to hear from him directly prior to even having any news come out. I think he'll probably do a presser, so we'll get more out of that. But you also got to have someone who's kind of a cultural fit. That's very important to Wren Baker. So as much as I said he's not going to marry himself to WVU or West Virginia connections, he has said this publicly too. He's going to need somebody that is okay with the fishbowl atmosphere, that knows that within a 300-mile radius, you are going to be pulled over at a gas station and be told about what the Mountaineers did that weekend, good or bad. And this is north all the way down to south. He's going to need someone that's aware that you're recruiting is not just in the state like it is at some schools. You're going to have to consider the WPIL as your local recruiting base, which maybe is weird to some. As you know, you're going to have to be aware of the atmosphere in the region that I think Neal Brown took a while to get used to. I do. That there's a lot of West Virginia fans in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of West Virginia fans all over the place. There's West Virginia fans all over the world. It's not just about what you're doing there. You do have your fan base in the city of your rival, which is not common all over the country. That's kind of weird. So you got to be fine with going to Pittsburgh and talking to people in Pittsburgh and recruiting there. And when you're on your radio show, you're taking calls from knee deep in Pittsburgh, even though that's Pitt's territory. And you got to be able to deal with that. And so that's all. Wren Baker is going to ask about all of that. So And Odom, for example, that's always brought up. I mean, that would be the only concern there. He's from a whole other side of the country. He maybe is not aware of the recruiting situation. He's the hot group of five name. He has them in the top 25. Is that like a Neal Brown hire though? But is he aware of that atmosphere? Because I think Neal Brown did underestimate a little bit early on. I mean, everyone plays that viral clip that he told Narduzzi, hey, it's a lot of hype for one game. And Narduzzi's like, yeah, we haven't had this yet, but I kind of expected this to be this way. and Brown, he then got used to it. But I mean, that's what it's going to also be. Like another weirdness, as you know, too, you're not in the same conference with Pitt. Okay, you're not in the conference. 13-9 is literally impossible. It cannot happen in this current format. It's not a worry for you. But if you roll the Big 12 and lose the brawl, there are fans mad. And they're going to be upset about the year. Like, you have to know that game is going to be very important regardless of the rest of the season. Like, you could win a conference title and be in the playoff. If you lose the brawl, there are going to be fans that will view that as unsuccessful. And that is not fair, really. That obviously you'd rather want to win the conference, but that exists too. So if the person can handle all of that, it is very important to Wren Baker, as well as, being a coach on the field, obviously.
Yeah, and of that three, I know you mentioned them between Rich Rod, Jimbo, Nick Saban. Is there one that you think is more likely than the other? Like, to me, in my just total opinion of the whole thing, is I think Jimbo Fisher is a legitimate candidate, and I would not be surprised if he's the guy. Would you say that he is more of a realistic choice to be the next head coach other than, Nick Saban and Rich Rod?
Yeah, I would say he absolutely is the most realistic. Now, if I had to bet, I wouldn't be shocked if none of them get the job. If I had to rank it in terms of realistic options, I do think Jimbo would be the most realistic. And I also think he's the best option of those three. And that includes Saban. Obviously, Saban, greatest coach of all time, greatest resume of all time. He's older. He's all the 7 rings are great.
And he's going to be his assistant.
Right? Like Pat McAfee. Is he
Pat McAfee and Nick Saban are going to be the coordinators.
Yeah,
for
right.
Jimbo.
Like, maybe that'll some are hoping that. But like, Saban's older, and honestly, if I'm Saban and advising him in a private room, I would honestly say to him, dude, you have 7 rings. The only thing you can do is mess up this legacy. You've never had to worry about this 12-team college football playoff. If you come in the 12-team college football playoff at your home state in West Virginia and you don't win a Big 12 after you having the 7 rings, you're going to taint this legacy. You're going to taint this legacy, because then everyone's going to say you can only do it at a blue blood. And when you're dealing with the regular program, the common folk, you're not able to get it done. Like, that can only hurt him. I just wouldn't mess with it. But in terms of realistic, I think Jimbo is the most realistic and the best. Then maybe Rich Rod and Saban, I just don't think is realistic at all. That's why I put him in there. Obviously, his resume is the best. But if I was hiring, if it was up to me, if I'm Wren Baker, I would consider Jimbo 100%. I would put the most energy into him, even more so than Rich Rod. Like, I would love if the program could repair things with Rich Rod, and whenever he retires, I do think, they should consider honoring him in certain ways, etc. But as far as coaching now, he's in his early 60s. He's having success at a group of 5, but it's not like he's steamrolling it. Again, he had the one big year at Arizona, but no other power year was better. I mean, Jack, WVU has more 10-win seasons since he left WVU than he does. So it's not like there's great success there after WVU. But as far as Jimbo, he's 59, I believe. He does have a national title. Yes, Texas A&M was bad with tons more resources than he'll ever get at West Virginia, but it's a winnable Big 12. I do think if he comes, I think kind of where I think if he comes, you're getting an influx of recruits. You're going to get an influx of transfers who are going to want to play for him, and they're on national TV almost every week. Like, the major networks would salivate over that, especially with him coming home. They would get the packages ready. Like, win or lose, they would have tons to cover on that. I think that would really, really boom the program. And I think maybe he would be the most likely to be persuaded, because there's no other major coach looking at him, major program looking at him. If I were him and I was, in his camp, do you really want to end your legacy that way at Texas A&M, being ousted and them agreeing to pay all this money just to get rid of you? Like, that looked really bad on him. And I think, wow, Ken Kendrick loves Rich Rod, because I can confirm that. Ken Kendrick's pick is Rich Rod. There are other boosters. There are other members of Country Road Trust. There are other Wolfpack members. There are other people that do donate who are big names that I think would would be able to be sold on Jimbo as well. And he would check all the boxes for Wren Baker, but it would be a little bit off the board for Wren because he doesn't normally marry himself to ties. And I to be selfish a little bit, if you're Wren Baker, you have to think, if you bring in Rich Rod, maybe if you bring in Saban or Jimbo, how much credit are you getting for these future titles that everyone's talking about? Like, you don't want to, Wren doesn't want to totally be in, like, it's just, totally background where I'm a silent partner in all of this. I think he wants to be part of the guy that brings the glory back. So, but maybe Jimbo could do that because he's not actually coasted West Virginia. But that would be the best one. I would pound the pavement on that phone call, and I would get him to tell me no before I really move off of it. But Saban is just a pipe dream, and I don't even see Rich Rod happening. And I do think there's a lot of downside of Rich Rod happening. But like another one I'll throw out there for those, Anthony Beck has brought up some now because he's coaching this in Spring League, XFL, UFL, and he's a former player. And he talked to us even toward the end of the season about he wants to coach in college football, not the NFL. He thinks he's more of a college. Standing there listening to him, I don't know if you heard the video. It felt like he was trying to pitch himself for WU. Like he won. Like,
I didn't hear that, but I'll have to go back.
Yeah, like he wants to do. He even gave the answer like, I don't want to do NFL. I want to do major college football. I love the Big 12. I'm comfortable here. Like those type of answers, and it's like, okay, like I get it. And he just threw the ... was his answer to again. That was his reaction to the Neal Brown news. But I will say this: really, really great guy. Really, really underrated all-time player. I actually saw over the summer, I don't know if you saw a member of the Oakland Zoo threw out there like the all-time WU team, and he just didn't include Anthony Beck. Like he's the greatest tight end in WU program history. He is. Like I think he gets slighted a little bit, and he's become a solid coach. But 2 years in spring football to then coach West Virginia in the Power 4 Big 12 seems wild to me. And if they're going to do that, they can wait until the middle of January. There's no rush. He'll take it. No other program would give him that job right now. I don't think that is the excitement, the influx of excitement that maybe Jimbo could be, or even Koto-Nicki would be as a hot coordinator. That screams almost the worst option of any of those. And it's no slight to Anthony Beck, but like 2 years of the XFL and UFL, and that's enough to coach the Mountaineers. That then would tell me the program doesn't have the value that I do think it still has.
Any dark horse candidates, maybe one that not a lot of people are talking about that you think could get a call?
A lot of people are already out there putting a lot of these names out there. Let me actually just quickly go to, we did put out, are putting out a list of full-on candidates here. So I'll see let me see here. Obviously Tony Gibson's one. He's not a dark horse, though, obviously has connections. Okay, so maybe another dark horse of one we haven't mentioned here. And I don't think this guy's going to get the job. But Dan Mullen's brought up by some. I've heard Dan Mullen brought up by some donors. So he is somebody that some actually would like. I don't think I'd love that hire. A lot of the other ones are group of 5 assistants maybe that I could bring up. And I do think a dark horse to keep it in West Virginia, and this might open up some ears to some of your viewers here, especially at the station. I think Charles Huff could be a dark horse. I don't think Huff's going to get the job. And I do think it would be a little bit odd perception-wise to say that you're a program that is above playing Marshall as a group of 5. And I get why, because you're a power program and you don't get much credit for that victory, but then you're going to go ahead and take their coach. Like that would be a little odd to me, perception wise. I don't think they would do it, but Charles Huff, 9-win year, then it became a 6-win year. Now he's vying for a conference title this year at Marshall. He had success under Saban, won a national title at Bama as an assistant. He is a name. He's had success. It's been a roller coaster there at Marshall. If we were talking a year ago, they all wanted him fired. He's been in viral moments too. So I think he's a dark
and
horse.
If he stays in West Virginia, you can probably still keep the all-you-can-eat biscuits NIL deal.
100%, and that would be enough for me. That would be what I would want. I would really appreciate, the press conference. Then maybe they just pass around Tudor biscuits during the presser. That would be great, 100%. So I would throw out Huff as a name, as a dark horse. And I know he loves Marshall and really is tied to Marshall, but it's hard to say no to West Virginia. If you're in West Virginia and you're at Marshall, you're going to get more money. He's also doing it at Marshall. I think their budget was $39 million. So if you think West Virginia is kind of low end of the Big 12, that's way more than what he has at Marshall. So he might want to do that. His press conferences would be lit with viral moments. He would get some love there. I think that's not enough for the program, though. I mean, I would like him to be able to do it back-to-back years, show me he can contend at a group of 5 level in the Sun Belt back-to-back years, not taking this dip every now and then. But I'll give you Huff as a dark horse candidate because I don't think people are bringing him up enough. And I do think it would make sense to at least interview him. But Wren is going to definitely do his due diligence over a myriad of candidates, all the way from coordinators, assistants, group of 5 guys, major conference guys. He's going to at least obviously talk to Jimbo, Saban, Rich Rod, and get their thoughts. If not, say, would you be interested yourself? All of that will happen. And I trust Wren Baker to make the right decision here. Every coaching hire he's made so far, I do think has been a good one. And some of it under tough circumstances. He did not hire Brown. So I think he's enjoying this. But no matter what happens with DeVries or anyone else in the program, if Wren Baker does not have success with this football hire, it'll hurt his career. Like, this is very important to his career, and he's in his 40s too. So he has many more years to go. But he swings and misses here, and it's another Neal Brown situation, then he's likely the next to go. That's what happened to Shane Lyons.
Yeah. Yep. Mike Asti, West Virginia Sports Now managing editor. Mike, let us know where you can find all your other stuff too.
Yeah, man. Of course, WVSN. We got a lot of coverage going on right now, so keep checking in there. I also am a national writer at Yardbarker, going to be doing their NFL Power Rankings coming up, involved with SiriusXM, and I have a podcast of my own, Mic Drop, which is available on Sirius, also everywhere you get your podcasts, and on Believe. And I'm a few other places too, but you can just find me there at Mike Asti 11 on social media to make that easy for you. So I appreciate the time, man. And yeah, a lot more will go on. So this is only the tip of the iceberg in a national coaching search in this climate for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to touch base again once a decision's made, a candidate's found. And I appreciate you for coming on, man. Thanks a bunch.
No problem, man. Have a good day.